this is an example of a late cylinder musical box, the sort that were made in Switzerland for the greater part of the 19th century. It was largely a cottage industry. As you see, the cylinders here are covered in little tiny pins, each one of which had to be put in by hand. And you get 4 tunes in this example on each cylinder, and you get 6 cylinders with the box. So you've got a fairly wide range of tunes, but you were still restricted to those 6 cylinders. Now, about 1890, which is probably about the date of this box, the Germans invented a machine like this, which plays discs. Now, these were stamped out on a machine by the thousands, so that they were much cheaper to produce, and all the popular tunes of the day could be put onto disc very quickly. And once you'd bought your machine, you could buy any tune you liked. So obviously it gave you a much wider scope. The result was, of course, that the disc machines from Leipzig, where most of them were made, soon pushed these nice Swiss jobs off the market altogether. However, by about 1900, they were themselves being pushed off the market by the gramophone, the first example of which we have here, which in fact dates like the musical box there from about 1890. Now, this was marketed as a toy in Germany. It's one of the very first, in fact, probably the very first type of machine ever marketed for playing disc records. It's a fairly crude machine, and I won't attempt to play it because all you're going to get is a sort of scratching noise. But there aren't many of them about, so it's quite an interesting thing. They didn't start to develop commercially, these, until they got a spring motor put into them in the middle 1890s, at which time the cylinder phonograph was also coming onto the market in large numbers. Well, that was Florrie Ford, music hall artist of the early years of this century. A record made, I should think, about 1906. Of course, she went on to record for many years after that on discs, which were, in fact, beginning to take over from the cylinder in popularity at about that time. Now, here's another one we're going to have a little bit of. Harry Champion, perhaps even more famous than Florrie Ford, singing that funny little bobtail coat. Well, that was an acoustic recording of Jack Hilton, played on the contemporary gramophone, the sort of thing that flappers used to dance to in the early 20s. In 1925, a new electrical recording process was introduced, and just to show how much better it was, we've got down here a later recording made by Jack Hilton and by the electrical process and played on a gramophone of the late 20s. At this time, in the late 20s, enthusiasts were developing machines of their own for playing rather different sorts of records on, taking into account the new principles learnt with electrical recording. And here we have a classic example of what is really the hi-fi of the 1930s. We've got a large horn made of papier-mâché, designed actually on very scientific principles, made reputedly out of old London telephone directories. And you see that in this particular example, the enthusiast has made his own extension to it. And we're going to play a record of Dame Nellie Melba on it, which is just the sort of record, of course, that enthusiasts would have played at the time.